Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller has been handed a ban of just 6 months by the WBA in what I believe is completely inadequate. And I'll get to the news and then some comments because I think this is a bit of a joke sentence and for multiple reasons. So see here on screen, heavyweight contender Miller suspended by WBA. This is Steve Kim's story on ESPN. So it says, the WBA has passed a resolution suspending heavyweight contender Jarrell Miller for 6 months for failing multiple drug tests prior to his June 1st bout with unified champion Anthony Joshua, which has since been postponed. And I would note that that resolution has not been posted on the WBA website at the time that this video has been published. So it says the different drugs that Miller tested positive, GW 1516, EPO, HGH, and separate voluntary anti-doping association, VADA, administered tests. So it says, according to the WBA, Miller will be withdrawn from its rankings, where I would note he was number 2 in its rankings. He will also have to register with VADA at his own expense and undergo random testing. After his 6-month suspension ends on September 19, if he intends to return to the WBA rankings, I think that was a cop car, he must submit those test results. I think it's fair, said Greg Cohen, Miller's co-promoter, pointing out that the length of his suspension is in line with past offenders, most recently Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders, who have failed drug tests before middleweight title fights in the last year. It's appropriate, and we just look forward to moving on to bigger and better things in the future, added Cohen, who believes Miller will comply with the WBA's ruling. He believes he'll comply or he will comply. I don't think he has a choice. Certainly by way of this resolution, he's required to, and I'm sure Jarrell will be compliant with the resolution. Miller is not currently licensed in any state, but Cohen made it clear that Miller will not be looking to fight in any jurisdiction during this WBA ruling. With this suspension, he can't even apply till the September 19 deadline, so we'll come across that bridge when we come to it. Joshua is still slated to fight in early June. Okay, so that's not part of the Miller ban. Just context there, looking likely he will face Andy Ruiz Jr. So anyway, 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. What an absolute joke. It really is a joke. There's a guy putting needles in himself, injecting himself with human growth hormone, EPO. At least EPO was injected. We do know that because he can't have that any other way. There's a systematic case of doping here, caught out on multiple tests in different times that they were taken. GW 1516, endurance and fat burning, EPO and HGH, human growth hormone. So he was trying to gain a massive advantage for his fight with Anthony Joshua. Knew he was going to be tested randomly by VADA, had to take these random tests which were part of his contract, extra testing, and he still took the gamble. And he's been caught out for 3 different substances. And then he just gets 6 months. It's akin to a slap on the wrist with a wet bus ticket. Because let's face it, had he actually gone ahead and fought in June or whatever, he probably wouldn't have fought close until the end of the year anyway. So what, is he missing effectively 1 fight through this ban? I mean, that's a one way you can look at it, that his punishment is effectively he's been banned from fighting for 1 fight, 2 max. He wasn't going to have any more than 2 fights in the next 6 months. And that whole narrative of he's one of the most active heavyweight boxers in the heavyweight division, I mean, that was all based on, not a lot of anything, really. He only had 3 fights last year. 2 of them were in close proximity, but there were only 3 fights for the whole year. So if he's only fighting 3 fights, he's only missing out on the 1 or 2 fights here. This is not really a massive disincentive, is it? And what sort of message does this send to anyone else? That you can actually undertake this level of systematic doping and just get, a tap on the hand saying, don't do it again, 6 months. And he's going to undertake some VADA testing while he's banned, which I guess, is a good thing because then he's got the risk that they will turn up on his door and it's a disincentive to dope again. Because if he dopes again, obviously then the punishment extends even further or could be, a separate bout of even a longer term. Who knows? But then again, it's the WBA. They've just handed out a ridiculous 6 months. That really is quite inadequate in my view. And Greg Cohen there is saying he thinks it's fair. Of course he does. He wants to make money off Miller, so he's hoping for as little as possible. And the talk there of Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders. Well, in the Alvarez case, which I want to specifically go on, Canelo Alvarez did not have a history, whereas Jarrell Miller did. He'd already failed a test in his combat sports career back in 2014. This wasn't just the first time, and it wasn't just one substance. Alvarez had one substance in his system, which was clenbuterol. And obviously he fell back on the excuse of tainted meat, and the WBC, in its wisdom, ate that up. But the point I'm trying to make here is he had one thing in his system. He had no history of doping. He was caught, and then he got 6 months. And many people felt that was a really light touch. And then you have this guy, Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller, who had 3 substances in his system, arguably much worse than clenbuterol. He has a history of doping, and he's getting just 6 months. It was a systematic case of doping where he was trying to gain a massive advantage in his fight with Anthony Joshua, and he got caught out with the testing. To me, sometimes I just think that boxing is a complete joke, because this just proves that the sanctioning bodies have absolutely zero teeth and zero credibility. It's time for the WBA to actually treat these cases with a bit more rigor and actually hand down appropriate sentences. Hand down some sentences that act as a deterrent. Because Miller may look at this and go, okay, well, I can do the VADA, I can do the 6 months, and then after that, he's effectively free to go on doing what he had been obviously doing. And if he has lesser testing than he did for the Joshua fight, which is basically the rest of his career, who knows what he could get away with, because obviously there is the suspicion that he's been doping for years and been getting away with it. And you must remember, a lot of these compounds can be fast-acting and only in your system for a short amount of time. We were hearing through some of the reporters that, 12 to 24 to 36 hours for different substances, they flush out of your system, but you still have the benefit of them. So, 6 months, an absolute joke. WBA deserves a complete uppercut here because it's completely disgraceful. And the fact that this guy could be back in the ring sooner rather than later after this clear and deliberate case of systematic doping, one of the worst cases, I think, in memory. And remember, it wasn't just one thing. He was caught on 3 different tests in a short space of time, in quick succession. That's what makes this so bad, and the substances as well. It wasn't just like he could fall back on some excuse and say it was tainted meat, or in Luis Ortiz's case it was blood pressure medication. This was HGH, EPO, which he had to have injected, and GW 1516. It's pretty high-powered stuff here. So the WBA, this is, in my view, completely disgraceful. What do you make of this? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.